Cells and Life, Unit 1. There are living things and non-living things. What could make living and non-living things different? They are the building blocks of life. Living things share the 7 characteristics of life. The first is that they are all made up of the building blocks of life, atoms. People didn't always know about cells. The cells that make up living things are very small. Early scientists had no tools to observe cells or to study them. Then, more than 300 years ago, Robert Hooke built the first microscope and looked at cork. He described the things inside as little boxes and named them cells. The first is that all living things are made up of one or more cells. The second is that cells are the smallest unit of life, and they perform different functions that keep organisms alive. The third principle is that all new cells come from cells that already exist through the process of cell division. This was created in 1830. Electron microscopes beam electrons through an object or an object's surface. This can magnify an image to 100,000 times or more. There are 2 main types of electron microscopes: transmission electron microscopes (TEMs) and scanning electron microscopes (SEMs). People use TEMs to study very small things, such as the structures inside a cell. In a TEM, the electrons that pass through the object produce an image. The image can be viewed using a computer. People use SEMs to study the surface of an object. In a SEM, electrons bounce off the object. Characteristics of life: living things are organized. Living things grow and develop. Living things reproduce. Living things respond to stimuli. Living things maintain internal conditions. Living things use energy. Types of cells. There are 2 types of cells. That all living things are made up of one or more cells. Prokaryotic the second is that cells are the smallest unit of life, and they perform different functions. That is the most important feature of prokaryotic cells. The third principle is that all new cells come from cells that already exist because they generally have less parts. This was created in 1830s, like bacteria. Some of them live in small groups called colonies. Only eukaryotic cells have other organelles inside of it. Most organelles have linings. Look at the picture and memorize the different pictures, kingdoms, and their meanings or explanation. Different cells have different functions, but all cells have some parts in common. One structure that all cells have is cell membranes. Inside the cell is the cytoplasm. The cell membrane is a flexible covering that protects the inside of a cell from the environment outside the cell. The cell membrane surrounds the cytoplasm and controls what enters and leaves the cytoplasm is a fluid inside a cell that contains salts and other molecules. A cell membrane is semipermeable. This means that only certain materials can move through the membrane, called permeability. Some cells have a cell wall, as shown in the figure below. Plant cells, fungal cells, bacteria, and some protists have cell walls. A cell wall is a stiff structure outside the cell membrane. A cell wall protects a cell. It helps the cell keep its amino acid molecules made up of carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, nitrogen, and sometimes sulfur, join together to form long chains called proteins. Some proteins help cells communicate with each other. Some proteins transport substances inside cells. Proteins are made on small organelles called ribosomes. A ribosome is not surrounded by a membrane. Ribosomes can be attached to an organelle called the endoplasmic reticulum or ER. The ER spreads from the nucleus through most of the cytoplasm. ER with ribosomes on its surface is called rough ER. Rough ER is where proteins are produced. ER without ribosomes on its surface is called smooth ER. Smooth ER is important because it helps remove harmful substances from a cell. It could be simplified to a series of networks throughout the cell which proteins and molecules can move. Some cells also have sac-like structures called vacuoles. Vacuoles are organelles that store food, water, and waste materials in a cell. Plant cells usually have one large vacuole. It might take up half of the plant cell's volume. Vacuoles help support the plant. Some animal cells have many small vacuoles. These vacuoles can detach from the cell through exocytosis and fuse with another cell in endocytosis. The Golgi apparatus is an organelle that gets proteins ready for their specific jobs. It then packages the proteins into tiny membrane-bound, ball-like structures called vesicles. Vesicles are organelles that transport substances to other parts of the cell. Some vesicles in an animal cell are called lysosomes. Lysosomes help break down and recycle different parts of the cell. Mitochondria are the organelles that power the cell, call it the powerhouse of the cell. They are found in both animal and plant cells. It is also surrounded by two membranes. Mitochondria are the most vital part of cellular respiration. Cellular respiration is a series of chemical reactions that convert energy into food molecules into a usable form of energy called ATP. Note: chloroplasts are organelles that use light energy to make food and also make the plant green. Glucose that is created from this can be stored for later energy. The nucleus is basically the remote control for the entire cell and stores the cell's DNA inside, like a little file. DNA is organized into structures called chromosomes. It also carries instructions for how to make proteins for the cell. The nucleus also contains an organelle called the nucleolus. The nucleolus makes ribosomes that help create proteins. Many shapes and sizes. The structure of the cell relates to its function. Cells can be very different from other cells, like its function, shape, and color. Take red blood cells for instance. They are round, red, and pass blood through our body. The name comes from the shape, and the function is in the name too. Take a look at the photo and its correct explanation.